Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
There are a whole bunch of companies that offer both the ability to take money in and make payments out. But if you look under the covers, it's effectively two different businesses. And so by us being really the only one, our competitors are either companies that just do the money in part or just do the money out part. And we can do both better than any of them. Lower cost, more efficient, better cash flow, all of those things because of our combined solution.
That was Bob Kaufman, the founder and chairman of the board of ConnexPay, and he is my special guest on this episode 323 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. With ConnexPay, you can get immediate access to incoming customer funds, use those same funds to pay suppliers quickly, and improve cash flow for your business, all in one place. Bob and I talk about what makes ConnexPay unique in the marketplace and how they help businesses with money in and money out, as he likes to put it. We also talk about his recent move into the role of chairman of the board. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Bob. Thank you for being here, and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. If you don't mind, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a Minnesotan, so if you catch the accents, sorry. But I grew up in a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul. I have 4 grown children now, ages 20 to 25, that all still, if they're not in college, are in that part of the country. I went to University of Minnesota for my undergrad, and then the University of Chicago for my master's degree. My wife and I were one of those silly couples that made a decision a few years ago to get out of the winter. So we now spend 6 months and a few days in Florida, where we bought a home here in 2021. And then we spend the nice parts of Minnesota, though you can't beat the summers there, back up north.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's talk about the company ConnexPay. So tell the audience what ConnexPay does.
Yeah, so we are a combined payment company that handles both sort of money in and money out is the best way I like to describe it. Think of us as, a combination of a Stripe or Square, or, those types of companies that help businesses accept payments from their clients. And then also a card issuer and a business that helps companies make payments out. So not unlike any other bank or American Express or WEX and Amex and, all sorts of these companies that help businesses make payments to their suppliers and vendors. So we're a combination of those two things, which, although it seems simple, it solves a whole bunch of pain points and adds value for our customers.
Okay. Are there certain verticals that you play in more than others?
Yeah, we started our business really in the travel industry. I'll tell this story because it's really how ConnexPay came to be. I'll keep it short. But when I was at the bank, I worked at a large bank in the U.S. here for 20 years prior to starting ConnexPay, and I was talking to a potential client about our virtual cards. And I said, look, not only should you choose, the bank as your virtual card provider because we have this great technology and we have this great cashback rebate we're going to pay you, but we also have this division over here to help you accept payments. So at the same company, we can support you as it relates to all the money in from your customers and all the money out and the payments you need to make to your suppliers and vendors. And the CFO looked at me and he said, well, that's great, Bob, but let me explain to you how this is going to go down. You're going to bring me a separate sales team to sell your acquiring services. You're going to bring me a separate contract to sign. You're going to bring me a separate technology to integrate into. And when I need support, you're going to give me a separate phone number to call. He said, tell me again how it's the same company. And so that was the day, Greg, it hit me between the eyes that that's really how our payments ecosystem, not only in the US, but across the globe, is set up. The concept of taking money in and making payments out are really two different animals. And I could, spend another 15 minutes talking about how that came to be over the past, few decades. But it really starts from Visa and MasterCard. They were owned by the banks back in the day. And before they went public and spun off as their own entities, it's just how our payments ecosystem grew up. And so for companies like travel, think any intermediary. So certainly travel agencies, tour operators, think e-commerce marketplaces, insurance brokers, ticket brokers, companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, heck, Amazon. All these companies are selling a good or service that they don't produce, right? Think of them as a middleman. And so what does a company in that space need to do? They need to take a payment in and almost often in real time, make a payment out. And without ConnexPay, that becomes very cumbersome and painful for them to do that.
And how big is the company?
Yeah, so we're about 100 employees now. We started in 2017, so we're a 7-year-old business. Customers across the globe at this point. We processed about $10 billion in payments last year. We're profitable, and we're core to our business, which is handling both money in and money out for those types of verticals that I mentioned.
And is there a certain size company that this is a better fit for?
Yeah, I'd like to say our sweet spot and where we focus is sort of the middle market space, meaning we don't typically go after your mom and pop. Our goal is to have customers that do about $5 million a year in sales or more, up to a couple $1 billion. So as an example, we're not aggressively trying to sell to the Expedias or the Bookings of the world. They're due $50 billion a year in sales. At the same time, again, not just your corner mom and pop. Sort of that mid-market space is where we're best suited and set up our company to really give them, top-notch service.
Okay. And what would you say differentiates ConnexPay from your competitors out there?
When I think about our core competency, which is, one combined solution for handling a company's payments, both in and out, by doing that, it fundamentally changes some of the risk dynamics and the cash flow dynamics. And so when I started this business, I say a lot of people have a solution and they go looking for a problem, right? And this was the exact opposite. I had seen for years the pain points and the high costs, like literally within travel. I mean, many people that I talk to love to travel, right? It's a passion for many of us. And there's travel companies like agencies and tour operators that help us do that. And literally from a payments perspective, banks put them in the same risk category as online gambling and online pornography. And the reason they're viewed as high risk is because what's basically called a future delivery component of their business, meaning you buy something today, a flight or a hotel stay, and that actual activity doesn't happen for weeks, months, or maybe even a year from now, right? It's very different than using your credit card to pay for your meal tonight or to go to the store and buy a shirt. So there's this future delivery component, and that's what creates the risk. And so it makes it very difficult for travel companies to get what I would define as reasonable accounts to process payments. They often have to have large reserves, and certainly they pay high fees. And so in our model, where we have visibility into the entire payment ecosystem from the consumer all the way to the vendor getting paid, it fundamentally changes that risk dynamic. And by changing that risk dynamic, I'm able to offer lower rates to these customers. I'm able to offer them better cash flow terms. And so it significantly changes their business. They're already typically operating at very thin margins. And so we really don't have anybody else that I can speak of that is truly doing what we do. There's plenty of businesses, Chase, Payment Tech, Stripe, US Bank. There are a whole bunch of companies that offer both the ability to take money in and make payments out. But if you look under the covers, it's effectively as I just described, as really two different businesses. And so by us being really the only one, our competitors are either companies that just do the money in part or just do the money out part. And we can do both better than any of them. Lower cost, more efficient, better cash flow, all of those things because of our combined solution.
So quick question on the payout side. I've heard, sort of the trend. This is very macro, but say it's a Geico or some insurance company and you have a car accident. They're looking to potentially make a quick payout to I'm sure they have their financial reasons to do so, and they're pushing money to someone's bank account quickly as opposed to waiting months to, settle and send a check and all of that. So I assume that dynamic has influenced your business as well.
Oh, for sure. In fact, insurance is one of the verticals we're focused on. And also in many cases, we'll send a card payment directly to the repair shop so that, they can be paid quickly. And so, in many ways, it's streamlining and helping those entire processes. So to your point, people aren't out money for 3 months trying to get reimbursed, for their car repair or the repair on their home, whatever the case may be.
Okay. Well, where do you see the payments industry headed, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So, when we look at our lives as consumers, we've over the past, let's just say 10 to 15 years, have received a whole bunch of what I would call enhancements and creativity and technology improvements around how we can make payments and get paid ourselves, right? Whether it's, Venmo and Zelle and Apple Pay and Google Pay. And our payment processes, at least for me personally, have been significantly improved because of many of these innovations. However, you haven't seen that same scale of innovation in the business world, right? And we're talking about trillions of dollars of payments, many of which are still on a physical check. And so, we've been talking about this for a long time, but I think in the next, to your point, 3 to 5 years, 10 years for sure, you're going to see the type of innovation that we've experienced as consumers find its way into the business world. I think you're going to find businesses to start to demand and expect the same type of simplicity and speed at which consumer payments happen, but now in the business world. And so I think companies like ConnexPay and other innovators are going to be the drivers behind that.
Do you see blockchain and technologies like that affecting your business?
Given the markets we serve, no, I think it will in the general B2B space. Given travel is still our, number one market that we're focused on. And, in that space, I always tell people, when's the last time you paid for travel with anything but a credit card? It's the norm. And I think always will be, primarily because of the chargeback rights that you have, right? Also in e-commerce, when you think about your willingness to give your 16-digit card number to some company you don't normally do business with, maybe have never done business with in your life, and maybe never will again. How and why are we as consumers comfortable doing that? And it's because we know if you don't get what you demanded, what you paid for, you're going to call your bank and dispute the transaction, and you're going to get your money back. And it's really the only payment mechanism today that does that in an efficient, legal way. A lot of these others, even PayPal and certainly Venmo, they have dispute procedures, but they're more complicated and cumbersome, and it takes a while, and it's not clear what's disputable and what's not. And certainly blockchain will face some of those same challenges. How do I dispute something? And so real-time payments, that's still unclear. And so I think that's where in certain industries like travel, cards will always be the dominant payment force.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So back to your earlier comment about sort of the technology and innovation on the consumer side, going over to more the B2B side, how much of that do you think is driven or will be driven by sort of the Gen Z of the world who are now coming into the workforce? They've had a mobile phone since they were probably 8 or 10 years old. Everything they do is frictionless and easy. And, how much of that is being influenced by that generation, do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think you nailed it. I think there's just an expectation. I think about my kids, at 20 to 25 years, they've never seen a checkbook in their life. They don't know what it is. And so I think that's absolutely right. And I think we are guilty of just living with the norm and the status quo. And I think that generation is going to push the envelope there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. So tell us about your journey and how you got to your role there at ConnexPay.
Yeah. So, actually, I just recently, 2 weeks ago, moved into chairman of the board, and I hired or found a great leader named Ben Peters to take over the day-to-day as CEO. So I'm still very involved Like I say, I'm now working on the company instead of in the company, which has been my goal for some time. As the company has grown and grown and grown, I had less time to do the more strategic things, right? Finding that next strategic partner, that next large deal, helping the company with potential acquisitions, all those kinds of things. But, going back to the start, I was always sort of an entrepreneur at heart. My dad had his own business 24 years ago. I invested in of all things, a NASCAR affiliated speedway, a racetrack, because I'm a little bit of a car nut. So me and 3 other partners bought this racetrack that's just outside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And so I've always had this sort of entrepreneurial spirit in me. And even in my long career at US Bank, I was able to work at a large enterprise, but in an entrepreneurial way. I worked in a division that was sort of the most innovative at the company. And my boss there allowed me to sort of, do startup type things in a larger organization. And so when this concept for ConnexPay came about, I actually tried for a year and a half to stand up the business just within the bank, and just couldn't get the credit department behind it. Back to that travel concept and comment I made, right? Because travel was deemed high risk. The minute you used that word, it sort of didn't matter what came out your mouth next. It was no thank you, right? And so finally, it called my old boss at the time and said, gosh, I'm really passionate about this idea. I know it can help a whole bunch of businesses out there that struggle. Do you have any suggestions for me? And she actually said, Bob, you probably just need to just do it on your own. And I went home that night and made that comment to my wife. And she said, Bob, I think you should do it. And I said, but Steph, we're about to put 4 kids through college and, giving up this paycheck that is security for us. And she said, you know what? It's not about that. She said, you're not happy anymore. And that was the truth. Like, I had gotten to the point where the regulatory environment around banking has gotten really painful. And I wasn't able to be that entrepreneur within a big company anymore. And so 2 days later, anyhow, I put in my notice, and, here we are 7 years later, and just ecstatic, for just all the companies and people we've been able to help.
Awesome. So when you started at US Bank, were you always in the payments area, or did you start somewhere else?
For the most part, I was there 19 years in total. And I think maybe the first few years I was somewhere else, but then moved into the payments area. And so spent most of my career there.
Okay. Well, what are some things you're passionate about? And you may have mentioned one already on the car side, but maybe one work-related passion and one personal passion.
Yeah. So we'll do work first. At the end of the day, for me, you think about people that go into fields like nursing or doctors, because they're passionate about helping people. And I would actually say it's the same for me. But, in the business world, I get most pleasure out of not just selling a product and, oh, geez, we put another, $10 on the bottom line for the company, but something that truly can help a business. And, when we went through COVID, many of my customers, I would tell you, if it wasn't for ConnexPay, would probably have been out of business, because, we were able to significantly change their cash flow at a time when cash flow was a big problem for them. We were able to process payments and do it lower cost than others. We were able to make payments and give them more cash back than others. All of those things allowed all of my customers to survive. We didn't have a single client. We have over 250 customers today. During COVID, we probably had north of 100, and not a single one of them went out of business. And when you look across the industry, believe me, it was more than 0% that failed. And so that's what gives me the most pleasure and allows me to wake up and be excited about what I do, is to truly help individuals and their businesses succeed. And we're able to do that every day at ConnexPay. On the personal side, cars, and then, the other one's hockey. I grew up playing. All 4 of my kids played hockey. And so it's just one of those things that I have always been passionate about and continue to enjoy.
So do you play or just watch?
So I still skate a little bit, not as much as I used to, but I coached a lot. I coached all of my kids, and now I'm anxious to have grandkids at some point and being able to do the same and coach them.
I guess you'll have to move back to Minnesota for the winter for that.
That is true. That'll be the downfall, but it'll be worth it.
Although they have hockey in Florida, I'm sure.
That's true. That's true. Just not at the same level. That's for sure.
Right. Well, one final question. So, as you know, the payment space and fintech space has grown, and it's a great industry to work in. Very innovative, dynamic, transformational, and kids are coming out of college these days looking at what industry do they want to build a career in? And let's say they pick fintech or payments, and they come to you and say, "Bob, hey, I'm graduating. I'm looking at this industry. What would you tell them they need to do to be successful in payments?"
Yeah, maybe make a couple comments there. First of all, it's an industry that's not going away, right? And only going to continue to grow. It's sort of like, what are the two most certain things in life? Death and taxes. Well, there's a third thing, is that there's always going to be a need for efficient payments as the economy continues to evolve and grow. And so it's certainly an industry that's safe, that isn't going away and going to constantly have innovation and change. When I think about advice, you see a lot of failed companies. There's a lot of people have that entrepreneurial spirit, and more companies fail than succeed, right? And why is that? There's lots of reasons, but often what I see, like, I'm a big Shark Tank fan. Before bed, my wife and I were always watching Shark Tank, and I chuckle because some of the things on Shark Tank are awesome. Like, yes, there's a need, and some of them are like, okay, this person woke up with this crazy idea, but there's not really a need for it. And so that's the biggest thing is start with a real pain point. Search for, it's almost an inverse. People sometimes search for something cool and innovative. Search for the problem. Search for what is broken, and then, work to the solution as opposed to the other way around. And so, that would be my biggest thing. And then also get knowledge first. I think part of the reason I was successful in starting ConnexPay is I had 20, 25 years of knowledge and experience. One of my kids is getting her degree in entrepreneurship, which is awesome, but I'm not telling her to start her own business out of college. I'm telling her to go get some real world experience first and learn and make some mistakes on other people's dime. And because we all do. And then, then start something later. So those are a couple pieces that I would share.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice. I'm a Shark Tank fan too, and I agree with you. Some of the ideas that I know will be successful are the ones that actually solve a pain point. So
yeah, for sure.
Agree with you 100% there. Well, Bob, we're about to wrap up the show, so I just wanted to see if there was anything else you wanted to cover before we go.
No, I just very much appreciate you taking time and talking to me, and certainly ConnexPay.com has more info for anybody who wants to learn more about the company.
Great. Well, Bob, thanks so much for being on the show today. I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Greg. Have a great day.
You too. And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.